Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are in the very early stages of the 2032 season. Beat the Nationals 7 to 5 yesterday in Washington on opening day. And it's time to really get this season underway. We've got a pair of two-way players this year in Shohei Ohtani and Juan Estrada at different stages of their career. Ohtani, a 37, soon to be 38-year-old veteran who's been with us 6 years at this point in the final year of his contract. Estrada, on the other hand, is a 24-year-old who we scouted several years ago when he was available in the draft. Did not end up picking him, but we traded away the top prospect in our farm system to pick him up before this season. And he did pitch last year, making his major league debut in Pittsburgh, and really interested in seeing what he can do on the mound and quite honestly at the plate as well, because particularly against right-handed pitching, it looks like he could be on base a lot. We're going to be struggling to get him at bats because the team is so loaded right now, but that's not something that we can't potentially fix over the next few months by potentially trading away some players to open up some even more playing time for the likes of Estrada if he's successful in the limited opportunities he's probably going to have at the plate right now. And we've made it through the month of April, going fine for the Wings, 14-10 record, tied for first in the division with the Phillies. But you can see the Pirates, the Expos, the Braves, and the Marlins are all lurking within 3 games of us. The Mets, who have owned the division for several years at this point, in last place in these early stages with the worst record in baseball. I would think there's probably some chance that the high budget Mets will turn that around. Taking a look at the league leaders, Vance Honeycutt second in the league with 22 ribbies. Deshaun Seifu, as usual, leading the National League in stolen bases. And we don't have anybody among the leaderboard in terms of the pitchers. Taking a look at our team statistics at this point, the 14-10 record is a little better than expected. We're only expected to be 500 by how we've done, which is not surprising because we're middle of the pack 7th in runs scored and middle of the pack 7th in runs allowed. Bullpen ERA of 2.40 is excellent. But our starters with a 4.58 ERA rank 12th, and it has not been a particularly good experience. Chris Sabatka and Ohtani have both done fine, but Jarlin Susana, Jorge Carrillo, and the young Juan Estrada are definitely struggling. Fortunately for us, we have Hayden Yinger, Andrew Painter, and Sean Sullivan, who have all been key parts of our rotation over the last several years, waiting in the minors. Probably going to give Susana, Carrillo, and Estrada a few more starts before potentially making a move to somebody else in the rotation, given that we're in first place despite the poor performances of several of our starting pitchers at this point. So don't feel the need to make any rash immediate moves with the youngsters, the 26-year-old Carrillo and the 25 now year old Estrada particularly. Going to have them on a longer leash. If Jarlin Susana continues struggling, we could conceivably look, though, to move a Yinger or a Painter, or at least less likely right now based on how they've done this season, a Sean Sullivan into the rotation. And taking a quick look at our position players, not a surprise that Seifu and Honeycutt already each have WARs of 1 or higher this season. They're both hitting 308, but a very different 308. 308 with 7 homers and 22 ribbies in the case of Honeycutt. 308 with only 1 homer, but 3 triples and 12 stolen bases in the case of Seifu. but the OPS pluses of both of these guys are excellent. Again, at this very early stage of the season with a small sample size. Our two-way players are two of the worst players on our team. Ohtani is actually tied for the worst WAR on the team at minus -0.3 with newcomer Austin Wells and first baseman Samuel Basallo. So the three guys who are our first base slash DH slash right fielder are all on the interstate in terms of their hitting and combined for only 5 home runs in the month of April. And Estrada, as I noted, we've struggled to get at bats for. Does have 5 ribbies and only 20 at bats, so he's proven to be pretty clutch with the bat. But we're going to probably adjust the lineup a bit to get him some more playing time. And I think the guy that it's going to come at the expense of is Austin Wells. We're going to keep Basallo and Ohtani on longer leashes, but no reason to not see what the young Estrada can do against right-handed pitching with a few more regular at-bats. And we've slipped to second in the division, 19-16 record, but only 1 game behind. We have gotten Bryce Miller signed to an extension, and really not a bad extension. You may remember we signed him back after he had left us a few years ago to a 3-year deal at pretty low money with team options for the second and third years. He's since become our closer, but he was not looking for crazy money. He asked for $2 million a year. You can see we signed him to a similar structure with a little more money than his last contract, $1.6 million, followed by team options for $1.7 and $1.8. So even if we have to ultimately move him out of the closer role and just use him as a right-handed arm out of the bullpen who could be a spot starter for us, I think there's definitely some value in that contract. And if it doesn't go well, it's not one that's going to kill us. And another month in the books here on June 1st, and we have a half-game lead in the NL East. The Mets still struggling, 9 games behind. We're half a game up on the Marlins, 3 up on the Braves, 3.5 on the Pirates, 4 on the Expos, and 5 on the fading Phillies. So interestingly, the Mets, the Nationals, and our Buffalo Wings made the playoffs from the NL East last year. Right now, we are still certainly in contention as the division leader, but those other 2 teams are in 7th and 8th in the division. Seifu still leading the league in steals. You can see his batting average down to .291. And taking a look at the pitching leaders, I don't have anybody among the pitching leaders. Nasty Jeff Dover, who plunked a couple of our players on opening day, bouncing back from a rough start against us to have a good season, which is certainly what we would expect from the 24-year-old budding ace. Take a quick look at the team statistics, and things moving a little bit in the right direction, at least offensively, where we've moved up to 6th in runs scored, but we rank 8th in runs allowed, so still a very middle-of-the-pack season in terms of our statistics. Pythagorean suggests that we should be a game under 500, so we've gotten pretty lucky to be 29 and 22 winning records each of the first 2 months of the season. Taking a look at the team batting stats, we're pretty much middle of the pack in just about anything, except for walks, where we're horrible, and we're pretty good in strikeouts, stolen bases, and base running. ERA, we're middle of the pack, but that's driven by a really good bullpen and a still very mediocre rotation. We are second in pitcher WAR, and our defense this year has not been good at all, at least statistically. Taking a look at the pitchers, Sabatka has struggled a bit recently. Ohtani's still solid. Susana has straightened things out, and Estrada has straightened things out. Jorge Carrillo at this point, he's been really good for us since he came up almost 2 years ago at this point when he was in the bullpen, but has definitely been struggling in the rotation this year. We've given him 10 starts now, 63 hits and 20 walks allowed, including 6 home runs over just 44 innings. His SIERA of 450, I guess, is materially better than his ERA, but still not exceptional. And with Hayden Yinger, Andrew Painter, and Sean Sullivan, who are all established starters, doing really well for us in the bullpen, I think it's time to pull Mr. Carrillo from the rotation. So we will go ahead and do that. Before we do that, we'll just take a quick look at a couple of the better players, Honeycutt and Seifu, both with WARs of 1.5 not midway through the season, 2 months into the season. So they both slowed down a little bit, although Honeycutt with 11 homers and 31 ribbies. Those are both the best numbers on our team. Ohtani has started to hit the ball out of the ballpark, at least, batting just .214, but 8 homers and 19 ribbies. And Juan Estrada, we have been giving more regular playing time, hitting .250, no homers. He's walked 11 times, so his on-base percentage is .333. Certainly not exceptional, but we're just looking to get him as much playing time as we can. If we could get him to 300 plate appearances this year, which is kind of what he's on pace for, that would at least give us a good sense of what he can potentially do at the major league level. He's learning to play left field and right field at the major league level, which probably doesn't help our defense on the margins. And we've made it 70 games into the season now, and it's still been a fine year for Buffalo, 38-32 record, but we're one behind the Marlins now. You can see they've picked up 3 games on us in the standings over the last 10. So not in first place, but we're 3 up on a wild card spot, on the final wild card spot, so that is positive. But certainly with the way we're playing here and with the Mets and the Nationals, who have been 2 of the better teams in the division over the past several years, would certainly feel like an opportunity to hopefully win a division title and earn a first-round bye is in front of us. So that's certainly going to be our focus as we get closer to the trade deadline. Taking a look at the league leaders, Seifu, batting average down to .262, but does still lead the league with 25 steals. Been a pretty league average player so far, 1.2 WAR. So not a completely dynamic offensive season from Mr. Seifu yet, but still have 92 games to go, so plenty of time for him to hopefully put up some big numbers for us. Still nobody among the league leaders in terms of our pitching staff, at least among the top 3 in the big pitching categories. So the season has ultimately been fine so far, but here on June 21st, we're going to turn our attention to the first-year player draft. The Wings, by virtue of a very good regular season last year, won't be picking until 32nd this year, ahead of just Kansas City, the Angels, and those Mets that we've been talking about who have gone from first to worst this season. But hopefully we can find somebody interesting for us to consider. In a perfect world, given what our farm system looks like, would love for it to be a pitcher. Take a quick look at the player development rankings. Middle of the pack team at best, 19th out of 32 in all of baseball, and only 4 top 100 prospects: Arturo Flores, Dave Zapp, Jorge Berrios, and Joe Edwards, but no top 50 prospects, so definitely not top heavy in terms of our prospects. We've got a decent number of decent prospects. We basically have 7 guys ranked between the 60s and the 150s, but no real blue chip prospects in the organization at this point, unfortunately. Certainly no guarantees that we are going to get a blue chip prospect when picking 32nd in the draft, but we'll take a look at some of the big prospects out there and hope that some of them fall to us. And if it ends up being a pitcher, even better. And looking at the batters, we have, according to our scout, a extremely talented draft with 16 five-star potential players. Clearly, most of them won't likely be available when we're picking in the 30s, but there will likely be some of these guys available then. So we'll take a real quick look at them now. If you've got thoughts on who's not going to be around when we pick, who do you think the top prospects are, and then even more valuably for us, who you might grab if you think that they would be around. I always like to hear what people are thinking about these drafts. Dante Afriyie, pretty blah first base prospect. Obviously, with 65 contact and 75 home run power, if he developed both of those, he's pretty productive, but not much of a hitter, not much defensively. Does have the high work ethic to hopefully ensure his development. Juan Arcega, college player from the University of North Florida, looks pretty much almost ready to step into a major league lineup. Surprised he only hit 371 in college this year, but looks like he could be a good left-handed hitting corner outfielder, which is the last thing that we need at this point. Right fielder David Ayala, a lot of home run power, but not the most exciting prospect in the world to me. First baseman Steve Barnes, a little higher end, like the leadership, work ethic, and intelligence combo with adaptability, the four traits I care about the most. He's good in all of those, awful defensively, and no speed, but 80 contact plus 75 power, if those develop, equals probably a Hall of Fame career. Steve Cavanes, a young shortstop, looks like he could also have a pretty interesting bat with a decent-ish glove. Probably more of a third baseman at the major league level than anything else. Dave Clark, catching prospect, doesn't bring much to the table defensively, but like the durability and a potentially interesting bat. Dan Dorman, a right fielder, a right-handed hitting corner outfielder. That's a little bit different. Like the work ethic, not great defensively. Again, a guy with a really interesting potential contact and home run power, and unlike some of the other guys that we've looked at, he can actually draw a walk as well. Mike Dvorak, a center fielder, one of the better ranges among the outfielders we've looked at, high work ethic, okay on the base paths, like the durability and a potentially interesting bat. He'll probably be around when we pick because he's looking for $12 million, so he's going to be a expensive player that some teams will pass on. Tommy Dykstra, 21-year-old, college junior out of Georgia State. Not the worst prospect in the world. Another guy, we got a lot of guys with pretty good home run power. He can also draw a walk. Greg Frank, first baseman. You know what that means. No defense, no speed, decent potential bat if everything develops. Amari Odoms, a right fielder. Got more speed than just about any prospect we've seen, like the durability. He's a corner outfielder. Potentially interesting bat, but not exceptional. Bobby Pallas, corner outfielder. He could be around when we're picking, but I wouldn't be all that excited. Nehemiah Ravenel, third baseman. One of the more interesting overall bats if he really developed to his potential. Looking for a ton of money. You could play him at third. You wouldn't love doing it. Probably could also play first. Looks like he's a first/third baseman. That's about it for him, though. Ron Sutton, another third baseman. Another guy that you don't really love likely anywhere except first and third, does have a high work ethic, decent bat if things develop as a college player, a little further along than some of the other guys we've looked at. Dusty Wilson, shortstop, potentially interesting defensively. Could be an excellent third baseman, but with that 65 range, he could play short. You'd clearly prefer that the range be a little better and the error be a little better, but a guy who could play second, third, or short at the major league level, high work ethic and intelligence, and if everything develops, not a horrible bat. College player out of Middle Tennessee State University. Wonder what his ratings look like relative to like an A-level league. Yeah, I mean, you might play him in rookie ball for a couple of weeks, but certainly looks like he would be ready for A-ball this season. And Max Ziegler, another shortstop, another college shortstop, I would assume by his age and his ratings. Not great defensively, has a little bit of speed, high work ethic, and intelligence combo, and another guy who could have a potentially interesting-ish bat. And another guy, I mean, he's even more advanced. He was more than ready for single A. He's going to strike out a lot, but he looks like he is reasonably far along in his career. So those are the 5-star prospects. I know some of you also like me to check in on the most developed prospects, so I'll do that quickly with a couple other guys. Ron Culver, 22-year-old center fielder, looks potentially really good defensively, great speed. The bat and making contact is the question. Also don't love the low leadership and work ethic. But he is certainly ready to go right into A-ball. The question is how much development you're going to get out of him, given that he's almost 23 years old and he's got a low work ethic. Just don't know how close he's going to ultimately get to his ceiling. Jamie Faust, a second baseman, another college player, not great defensively. Could be a decent-ish bat. Happy birthday, Jamie. And Mike Heiner, a center fielder. He is ready. Another left-handed outfield and a corner outfield bat in the major leagues, so not exactly what we need. But he's got some speed. He could play left or right for you. And he looks like he's basically ready to hit at the major league level at this point. A little surprising that he only has a career, 310-ish batting average over 4 seasons at Bradley University. Looking at this profile, you would think that he would be putting up some absolutely monstrous numbers in college. So that's a look at the 5-star batting prospects, as well as a few college players who are a little bit further along. Again, out of those 20-ish players that we looked at, there'll certainly be a handful that are available when we're picking at number 32. So I suspect there will be some interesting opportunities available for us at our 32nd pick. I believe that's where we are. Yeah, 32 overall. So definitely should be some interesting players available when we do pick. And we do have some money this year, so we could go way over slot once or over slot 2 or 3 times over the course of the draft. The only downside to doing that is that we are a win-now team trying to compete for a title this season, so it would probably make more sense this year to try to use that money to bring on some talent to straighten our team out as we get closer to the trade deadline. But we certainly do have the flexibility this year to be a little more ambitious in the type of players that we take in the draft. Clearly, as I mentioned, the hope is that there will be some pitchers who intrigue us who are available. So let's take a look at the top end of the pitching class now. And only 4 or 5-star pitchers. So we'll take a look at actually everyone who's 4-star or better. One of these dozen or so players should make it to us, but probably only a handful of them. Jody Harvey, college player, fragile, which you don't love, but other than that, looks like a pretty interesting prospect. Already has 3 pitches that are major league quality. His stuff is close to major league level, movement way above. Question is going to be his control, and question is going to be staying healthy. Wouldn't mind a guy who's only a year or two away out of college. I don't think Harvey will be there for us. And he definitely does have some, I don't want to say red flags, but I don't love fragile player. Don't love a guy with low control. So certainly some yellow flags. Jake Leake, 18-year-old. 18 years old, already throwing in the low to mid 90s. Stuff looks like it could be absolutely electric if he completely develops, and he does have a high work ethic. Even if that changeup doesn't develop, he conceivably has an 80 slider, 75 cutter, and an 80 knuckle curve in a best case scenario. So stuff is going to be electric. He's going to have some movement, ground ball tendencies. Going to be throwing pretty hard by the time he's in his mid to late 20s, I would think. Control is a little bit of an issue, but certainly an interesting prospect. Federico Rosa, another guy with just incredible stuff. Love the work ethic, 18 years old, throwing in the mid 90s. Issue with him is whether that changeup will develop, because right now he's looking like he's most likely an extremely expensive relieving prospect, but still has a profile with that fastball and that cutter. If those two develop, and they're already not far off major league level, where he could be a devastating closer for many years to come. And Dave Van Gelder is the other 5-star prospect. He is clearly a reliever, not looking for a ton of money. Wouldn't love to draft a reliever in the first round, but if you're going to do it, an 18-year-old who's basically already got close to a major league fastball and isn't looking for a ton of money is probably not the worst way to do it. I don't think we'd go down that route even if he was available. Jesus Ramirez looks like he's a pretty advanced prospect here. 22-year-old starting pitcher out of Fresno State. Has an almost perfect personality, high leadership, work ethic, intelligence, and adaptability, low greed. I'd love to get this guy at 32, but there is absolutely no way that that's happening. Looks like he's going to have a 4-pitch arsenal of major league pitches, really good stamina, good at holding runners, talked about the great personality, doesn't throw incredibly hard. His control is the only real concern. If his control gets up to a 45, though, he is potentially a really interesting major league pitcher. Not looking for a ton of money either. Steve Sears, another starting pitching prospect, could end up a reliever with insane stamina if that change doesn't develop. Looks like an interesting pitcher, but $8 million for a likely reliever, probably not the direction that we'd go, which means he's probably one of the guys who will be around. Jonathan Cruikshank, a 17-year-old, another likely reliever, but another potential two-way guy. He looks like a pretty interesting potential bat as well. He's a corner outfielder, or at 6'7", a first baseman at the major league level. Not incredible power potential, but with 80-ish contact, really good at avoiding strikeouts and decent power, could still be a interesting player, reliever slash outfielder. Ken McTaggart, 18-year-old, likely ends up a reliever. Fastball not impressive. Not great movement on his pitches. He'll probably be around when we're pitching or when we're picking. Don't know that I'd go for him. Angelo Salazar has a potential, I guess, a potential 2 to 5 pitch arsenal. He would think that the fastball and sinker are already major league quality. You would think the slider and curve get there. So fairly, it's a 4 to 5 pitch arsenal. Question is how great any of those pitches end up being and the type of control he has. But 22-year-old out of Fairmont State, throws in the mid to high 90s. Honestly, doesn't look even ready to dominate Class A ball. So probably not as far along as you would hope for a college player. Another starting pitcher, Pat Underhill. Love the durability, love the stamina. Looks like a 3-pitch arsenal. Not a horrible profile. I don't think he's an ace, but he is durable. He's been pretty effective, not surprisingly, at the college level. Got a lot of stamina, got high leadership. He's going to have 3 average to really good pitches. You know, if he's a 60, 60, 50 guy, meh. But if he's a 70, 70, 60 guy with those 3 pitches, his stuff is pretty good. His movement will be above average, hopefully. And although his control isn't great, our scout at least thinks he's got the potential to be above average there. So he's not an uninteresting prospect who maybe would be around, particularly as a college guy who's looking for decent money. Verl Wilson, the last of the 4-star prospects, looks like another guy who could end up as a reliever. Definitely need either the curve or the change to develop. The curve, you just don't think it's got the potential to develop. The change, who knows? Certainly has the stamina and holding runners and durability that you'd love to see. Just a question of how well he's going to develop. So there's some interesting pitching prospects, and we'll also take a look at one of the 4.5-star guys, Tim Basler, just because he is apparently as far along as just about anybody in this draft. Don't love the low leadership and loyalty, but not the end of the world either. Do like the durability, certainly enough stamina to start. Looks like a 3 to 4 pitch arsenal. His stuff is going to be the issue. His movement on his pitches we think is exceptional. He's a ground ball focus. Looks like he's going to have pretty good control. Not a potentially awful option if he's available at number 32. I don't think he's ever an ace at the major leagues level, but you look at his ratings where they are right now, and probably a number 4 starter, worst case scenario a 5, and if everything works out well, he's a pretty solid number 3 starter. Like that he's already throwing in the mid to high 90s. Granted, he's almost 22 years old, but he is a not uninteresting prospect to us either. Bobby Cunningham, another guy who is pretty far along, good durability, probably more of a reliever with that profile. His stuff might just not quite be good enough, and he's also almost 23 years old. So there are definitely some interesting prospects out here for us to consider in the 2032 draft, which we'll be tackling in our next episode. So it certainly hasn't been a perfect season thus far for the Buffalo Wings, but again, 38 and 32, 1 game out, 70 games through the season. We are right in the mix for a potential 5th consecutive trip to the playoffs, but the goal is to hopefully, over the next 3.5 months, get into first place, leverage some of the money that we have available to hopefully improve our roster. And when we think about improving our roster, the pitching staff is starting to stabilize a bit. glad that we stuck with Estrada. He's been pretty solid. Yinger, his numbers for the year are good, but hasn't been pitching as well since we put him into the rotation. You can see he's basically a 5 inning guy, and after a nice first start, he's given up 4, and 6 earned runs. So definitely has not been good. Won his first start to go to 4-0, but his ERA has ballooned from 169 to 389 since he joined the rotation. So conceivably, Painter and or Sean Sullivan could be getting a shot for Yinger if he doesn't work out. Harleen Susanna also hasn't been great. He may be another guy that we consider moving into the bullpen if his mediocrity continues much longer. Bryce Young, 365 ERA and 16 saves through 26 games, striking out more than a batter per inning. But his ERA plus and his FIP minus aren't incredibly good. Only 7% of inherited runners scoring, though, so he has come in and when there's been runners on base, he's done pretty well ensuring that they don't score. Caleb Ferguson and Painter with decent stats. Same thing for Franklin Heel and Sean Sullivan. Again, I'm not doing the deep dive right now. Zane Adams has been good. Kyle Backus is always tough on lefties. And Carrillo, I guess, is pitching a little better since we've moved him into the bullpen. Taking a look at the lineup, we've got 4 players with WARs of above 1, but no one having a great season. No one really hitting all that well. 240 averages from Honeycutt and Collier, not what we expect. 262 from Seifu, not what we expect. And 231 from Rutschman, certainly not what we expect. Ohtani does lead the team with 13 homers, but is hitting just 215, so that is not good. Juan Estrada, the other two-way player, hitting 254 and 134 at-bats. Does have 9 doubles, no home runs. He's got no power at all. The nice thing to see is that he has drawn 23 walks, so his on-base percentage of 361 looks like that may be the best on the entire team of anyone who's got material playing time. The issue that we clearly need to figure out, though, is Samuel Basallo having a brutal year for us. And I know some of you didn't like the fact that we kept him this year instead of moving on from Takao Ota, or some of you kind of thought we should move on from both Basallo and Ota. But he is by far having the worst year of his career, hitting just $183. Does have power as usual with 8 homers and 164 at-bats. His BABIP is only 208, so I think there's a fair chance that he's got pretty unlucky. But he is just not producing at all. Vaughn Necker, as great as he was last year in limited playing time as a rookie, he's been pretty putrid this year in very limited playing time as a sophomore. That's probably just kind of evening things out. I think we're at a point, though, where it may be time to pull Basallo from the lineup, given that he's not hitting. And he also is average-ish defensive numbers at first base, but he's certainly not good there. We're obviously going to continue. I don't know if it's obvious. It's obvious in my mind that we're going to continue trying to get Juan Estrada at bats. But Austin Wells has gotten the batting average up to 245 at least. Not a ton of power, but we may try to get him a little more playing time in place of Basallo from time to time now. Maybe one of those bats can get going. The nice thing, I don't know if it's the nice thing, but the thing that works in our favor with those two guys is that Austin Wells, we did sign to a 3-year contract, but it's not at big money, and we've got team options for both the second and third seasons. And Samuel Basallo is heading into his final arbitration year, so we could always just try to trade him away. Have looked at the trade markets for both of those players, and not surprisingly, not a ton of demand for either player right now. But that's something that if they play a little better over the next few weeks and teams' needs change as we get closer to the trade deadline, there could be an opportunity to potentially move on from one of those guys either, as we try to figure out what we need to do to hopefully improve this team, get back to the playoffs for a fifth straight year, and hopefully finally get the Buffalo Wings into a World Series. And we'll find out our progress on those goals over the next several episodes. But in our next episode, it's going to be a deep dive into the draft. And can we find someone who will help us this year, along with likely many someones that we'll be hoping will help us 3, 4, 5, 6 years in the future. And we'll see who's available at number 32 and see who we end up picking, not only in the first round, but in all 20 rounds in our next episode. And if you've got ideas on where we should or shouldn't go realistically with that 32nd pick, obviously we know the top guys are not going to be around. Please share them in the comments, and we'll hopefully help me make a better decision when we get to that point in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.